You're crouched in tall, dry grass. It's 400,000 years ago. Your stomach is growling loud enough to hear. There is no fire. No pot, no pan, no spark that belongs to you. And you are starving. In front of you lies a dead antelope. A lion killed it hours ago and wandered off into the heat. The meat is raw. The blood has gone cold, and you have absolutely nothing to cook it with. So what do you actually do? This is the question almost nobody stops to ask about our ancestors. We picture cavemen roasting mammoth legs over a crackling orange fire. But for most of the human story, that fire simply was not there. So what on earth did you eat? Let's go all the way back and find out. Here's the thing that should stop you cold. Humans, in one form or another, have existed for around 6 million years, but the earliest solid evidence of fire used for cooking is only about 800,000 years old. Do the math on that gap. That leaves millions of years where our ancestors lived, grew, gave birth, and raised children with no cooked food at all. Not sometimes, ever. Think about that for a second. Every meal, every single day, eaten completely raw. No warm soup on a freezing night. No roasted meat after a long hunt. Just cold flesh, hard roots, and whatever you could tear apart with your own teeth. And somehow, they did not merely scrape by. They built the body and the brain that eventually became you. They fell in love, cared for their sick, and buried their dead. All on cold, raw food. So how? That is the real mystery. And the answer is far stranger than you would ever expect. Because it is not one thing. It is never one thing. The truth is a stack of clever tricks, some genuinely weird foods, and one gross but brilliant habit that may have grown your brain. We will start with the easy stuff, the food lying around in plain sight. Then we will get to the parts that sound made up but are backed by real fossils and real science. Stay with me all the way to the end, because the final fact flips everything you think you know about raw food. Let's go. Let's start where every ancient meal really began. Not with meat, with plants. Forget the image of the manly hunter dragging home a fresh kill. For most early humans, dinner was gathered, not hunted. Fruit, leaves, seeds, flowers, bark, and nuts. Go back far enough, around 6 million years, and our ancestors ate almost exactly like chimpanzees do today. And a wild chimp's diet is mostly fruit and plants. Meat makes up only about 3% of it. 3%. So picture your ancient ancestor less as a warrior and more as a patient forager, wandering all day, grabbing berries here, cracking a nut there. It was not glamorous work, but it quietly worked. Plants were everywhere. They did not run away. They did not fight back. And crucially, most of them could be eaten raw, straight off the branch. The problem is that wild plants are tough, really tough. Raw roots can feel like chewing on a piece of wood. Wild leaves are stringy and bitter and stubborn. Your ancestor needed jaws like a vise and a hole. Lot of patience, and they had both. When the fruit ran out, they dug. Underground roots and tubers became the backup plan. The fallback food for a hungry season. You could not see them from the surface. But they were down there, full of starchy energy. There were also seeds and wild grains, cracked between two stones and eaten as a paste. And tree bark, chewed slowly for the sugary layer hidden just beneath the surface. So the ancient world was a giant, messy, open-air salad bar. But plants alone were never quite enough, because a richer prize was hiding underground and inside the rotting logs. Here's what nobody tells you about the ancient menu. A huge part of it had 6 legs. Insects, grubs, and especially termites. It sounds revolting to you. Sitting there with a fridge and a phone. But to a hungry hominin, a termite mound was a jackpot. And I am not exaggerating the value even slightly. Gram for gram, termites are shockingly rich. 100 grams of termites carries about 75% more calories than the same weight of rump steak. Read that again. A little bug beat a steak. And termites came with a bonus. They lived in giant mounds, packed together by the thousands, just waiting to be scooped out, at a South African site called Swartkrans. Scientists found bone tools worn down in a very specific way. At first they assumed these were digging sticks for roots, but the wear pattern told a completely different story. These tools, between 1 and 2 million years old, were used to dig into termite mounds. Our ancestors had bug fishing technology before they ever had cooking. And fat white grubs pulled from rotten wood were soft, easy to eat and packed with energy. No chewing marathon required. And honey, on the rare day they found it, was pure liquid gold. Dripping, sweet, and worth every single sting, honey is packed with fast sugar, the quickest burst of energy in the whole ancient world. There were also ants, crickets, and juicy caterpillars, all free protein for anyone patient enough to gather them. This was not a desperate, last resort food either. It was a smart, reliable staple that never migrated away or hid over a hill. The insect aisle of the ancient world was always open, and it was busy. Now, let's talk about meat, because yes, they ate it. Just almost certainly not the way you imagine. You picture a heroic hunt, a brave spear thrower bringing down a giant beast. But early on, our ancestors were often not the hunters at all. They were the cleanup crew, the scavengers. A lion or a leopard would make a kill, eat its fill, and stroll away. Then along came our ancestor, nervously, to pick over whatever was left. And here is the genius part. By the time our ancestor arrived, the good meat was usually long gone. The big cats and the hyenas had stripped the carcass down. What remained was the bones. To you, that sounds like showing up to an empty fridge. To them, it was the whole entire point, because locked inside those bones was marrow. Soft, fatty, calorie-dense marrow that no other scavenger could reach. Why couldn't they reach it? Because it was sealed inside solid bone. But our ancestors had something the hyenas did not. Rocks. They would smash the bones open with a stone and scoop out the rich fat inside. Think about that for a moment. While every other animal fought over torn scraps of flesh, our ancestors calmly walked up, cracked open the safe, and took the treasure nobody else could touch. And that greasy marrow may have done something extraordinary to the thing between their ears. Now here is a food source that needed no chewing and almost no risk: the seashore, where the land met the water. Ancient humans found one of the easiest meals on the planet: shellfish, mussels, clams, and limpets, clinging to the rocks at low tide. You did not have to chase them. You did not have to fight them. You just walked along the shore and picked them up. And many shellfish can be eaten raw, straight from the shell, slippery, salty, and full of protein and precious fat. For a group living near the coast, a tide going out was like a market opening. The rocks were stocked fresh twice a day, every single day, for free. There were fish trapped in shallow pools and crabs hiding under stones. It was slow food, calm food, food a child or an elder could gather without any danger. No spear, no chase, no cooking fire, just patient hands and a good sense of the tide. The ocean quietly fed our ancestors long before anyone learned to cook a thing. But wait, eating cold, days-old meat off an abandoned carcass should make you violently sick. So why didn't it kill them? Here is a strange clue. Hiding inside your own body right now, your stomach is astonishingly acidic. The acid in a human stomach sits at a pH of around 1.5. That is roughly as acidic as the stomach of a vulture. A vulture, the bird famous for eating rotting roadkill without a problem. Think about what that actually means. Animals that eat clean, fresh food do not need acid that brutal. But scavengers do, because their food is often crawling with dangerous bacteria. That savage stomach acid is basically a chemical shield. It kills the germs in questionable meat before they can kill you. And here is the quiet implication. Our bodies evolved that shield for a reason. It strongly suggests our ancestors ate a lot of raw, risky, scavenged flesh. Enough that natural selection built us a stomach like a bird of prey. You carry the evidence of the ancient scavenging diet with you every single day. It is churning away inside you right now. Here is where it gets big. Your brain is a monster. It is only about 2% of your body weight, but it burns around 20% of your energy, even while you are fast asleep. A brain like that is wildly, ridiculously expensive to run, and you cannot grow one on a diet of leaves alone. Scientists even have a name for how our ancestors paid the bill. It is called the expensive tissue hypothesis. The idea is beautifully simple: to afford a bigger brain, the body had to save energy somewhere else, and the place it saved was the gut. Compared to an ape, humans have a surprisingly small digestive system. A gorilla has a huge barrel belly to ferment mountains of raw leaves all day. We simply do not. We traded gut for brains. But that trade only works if you feed the body rich, dense food. Food that does not need a giant fermenting gut to break down. And what is richer and denser than fatty bone marrow and meat? That greasy prize inside the bones was not just a snack. It may have been the very fuel that grew the brain reading these words. And that is not a metaphor. That is what the fossils quietly suggest. But raw food came with a brutal hidden cost: time and your teeth. Chewing raw meat is genuinely hard work. Wild meat is tough and rubbery. Nothing like the tender stuff on your plate. Chewing raw roots is even worse. So early humans faced a very real problem if you have to chew every meal for hours. When do you do anything else? One Harvard scientist, Richard Wrangham, ran the numbers on this. He estimated that before food processing, our ancestors may have spent nearly half their waking hours just chewing, half of your entire day. Imagine chewing steadily from breakfast until it goes dark. But then came a breakthrough that changed everything, long before fire: stone tools. Simple, sharp flakes of struck rock. With a sharp edge, you could slice tough meat into smaller, softer pieces. With a heavy stone, you could pound hard roots into a mush. And this small trick had an enormous payoff. In one clever experiment, scientists tested exactly this. Processing food with stone tools cut the number of chews by about 17%. On a diet that was 1/3 meat, and the force needed by about 26%. No fire required at all, just a rock and a clever hand. Your ancestors were meal prepping 2 million years before the first kitchen existed. So how do we actually know any of this? We are not just guessing. We can look directly inside their mouths. Researchers found the tooth of a human relative that lived around 1.2 million years ago in a cave in northern Spain called Cima del Elefante. Stuck in the hardened plaque on that tooth was a tiny time capsule. When scientists scraped it out and looked under a microscope, they could see exactly what this ancient individual had eaten. There were traces of raw animal tissue, uncooked starch granules from wild grasses, pollen from pine trees, even fragments of insects. But here is the detail that matters most. There were no signs of cooking, none whatsoever. This was a balanced, varied meal, meat and plants together. And every last bite of it was eaten raw. So this is not a theory scribbled on a chalkboard. It is a receipt, frozen inside a tooth, from a dinner eaten over 1 million years ago. And it tells us our ancestors were smart, careful eaters, mixing their foods long before they ever mixed them in a pot. Now, you might be thinking, but wait, didn't they have fire? And this is where it gets wonderfully subtle. Fire and cooking are not the same thing at all. Scientists found signs of fire that may be over 1 million years old, deep in Wonderwork Cave in South Africa. In 2026, fresh dating pushed some of that evidence back further still, to somewhere between 1 and nearly 1.8 million years ago. That sounds like early cooking, right? Not so fast. Finding fire is not the same as making fire. Researchers think these early humans probably did not create the fire themselves. They most likely grabbed it from a lightning strike or a passing wildfire. They carried a burning branch home and kept it alive, as long as they possibly could. It was borrowed fire, a kind of pet flame, and keeping a fire alive is a long way from cooking dinner on it every night. The routine, everyday cooking we all take for granted came much later. For a huge stretch of our story, fire may have flickered nearby for warmth and safety. While the food itself stayed stubbornly raw, the flames kept the predators away and the cold at bay. But the meal stayed raw. Fire was a guard dog long before it was ever a stove. Warmth and dinner were two completely separate problems to solve. Now let's be honest, because the picture is not perfectly tidy. Not every ancient human ate the same way. It depended massively on where you happened to live. A group by a lake might have feasted on raw fish and shellfish. A group on the open savanna leaned hard on marrow and roots. A group deep in a lush forest lived on fruit and leaves. Just like their ape cousins, there was no single universal caveman diet, and that popular idea of the ancient human as a pure meat-eating hunter, it is mostly a myth. The evidence keeps showing plants, insects, and scavenged scraps doing the heavy lifting, with big game meat as more of an occasional bonus than a daily meal. The truth is messier and honestly far more impressive. These were flexible, opportunistic eaters. They took whatever their landscape offered and simply made it work. One season it was fruit, the next it was roots, the next it was cold marrow. They followed the food, and the food changed with the weather and the land. And that flexibility is exactly why they survived when pickier. Animals did not. And now, the wildest part, the one I deliberately saved for the very end. If raw food was good enough to build the entire human race, then surely a modern human could live on it just fine, right? Here is the twist. We can't. Not really. Not anymore. Germany studied over 500 people who had eaten strict, raw food diets for years. In 1999, researchers in Gießen, the results were genuinely startling. Many of them lost dangerous amounts of body weight. And among the women under 45, about 30% stopped menstruating, partly or completely. Let that sink in for a moment. On a fully raw diet, a huge share of women became unable to reproduce. Their bodies simply could not pull enough energy out of raw food to keep everything running. And remember, these were modern people, with supermarkets, blenders, and the ripest, richest cultivated fruit on Earth. Now imagine attempting it with tough wild plants and cold scavenged marrow. Here is the quotable truth. We are the only creature that conquered the planet, yet can barely survive on the raw food that made us. Somewhere along the way, cooking quietly rewired us. It made us so efficient at eating that we can no longer comfortably go back. Our ancestors did not just survive raw food. They used it as a launch pad, lit a fire, and pulled the ladder up behind them. So the next time you are hungry and dinner is only minutes away, warm and soft and ready, take one quiet second. For nearly the entire human story, that easy meal did not exist. Your ancestors gathered, dug, scavenged, and cracked open bones with rocks. They chewed for hours under a wide open sky, and they did it all raw. They ate grubs and cold marrow and bitter roots. They slowly grew the very brain that lets you feel disgusted by it. And out of that strange, difficult diet, every effortless bite you take today was paid for by someone who ate the hard way, a long, long time ago. They were not primitive. They were resourceful in a way we can barely imagine today. They read the land like a menu and never wasted a single opportunity. They did not have fire, but they had something better. They had time, teeth, and an appetite for absolutely anything. If your expensive brain enjoyed its meal today, stick around for more.